Phase 2 will open up with Gnomeragon for its level up raid and Stranglethorn Vale for its PvP event zone. But how has Phase 1 gone and how have people reacted to it? In the case of Phase 1 and Black Fathom Deeps and Ashen Vale, the PvP event zone, people have loved the experience, myself included. There has been a rush of people spamming Ragefire Chasm for Horde and Stockades for Alliance, and Wailing Cavern and Dead Mines for both to get geared up for BFD. The bosses were tougher than some people expected, with a lot of people wiping and struggling with some of the later bosses, but the loot, experience, and freshness of the content made it a genuinely pleasant experience. As for the PvP event zone, people seem to be enjoying it. It's an overall okay experience. Blizzard has been fine-tuning it and essentially monitoring player reception and feedback to the event, both raid and PvP. Overall, I think it's good, but it could be better, and it's not as good as people expected it to be. This doesn't even account for the rush to get runes, the world feeling alive and active, seeing thousands upon thousands of players spamming these low-level dungeons because we're stuck here for a few more weeks. And almost no one is bored yet. I'd hope so at least. Leveling has been fun, people are getting alts geared up since the level cap is 25 and it's not difficult to do. Gold itself is now a valuable commodity, people are proud of their 50G, and if you want to buy gold with real money trading, it's $1 per gold, which is exorbitant. But then again, if people are selling, that means some of you are buying. So shame on all the gold buyers. Seriously, stop, you're ruining the game. But overall, Phase 1 is incredible and it only leaves people excited for what's coming next, and that is Gnomeragon on STV in Phase 2. Gnomeragon isn't an iconic dungeon or place, aside from the fact that the gnomes still do not have their homeland restored after 20 years. But what are the bosses in Gnomeragon and what kind of changes can we expect from this dungeon? When you go into Gnomeragon, you open up with Grubbus, a trog that is rather brutish but overall a simple fight. Since this is the opening boss, I don't think the difficulty of Grubbus will increase by much, but his loot table will definitely change. Grubbus spawns after a short roleplay event in which you clear waves of mobs, avoiding the dynamite explosion before he comes out hollering. I wonder if they'll keep this event or if they'll remove it. It makes sense either way. The second boss is Viscous Fallout, another simple boss. You simply have to clear the trash mobs around us so you can pull it without pulling extra packs which will wipe your party. As far as being changed for a raid boss, I assume they'll make it so you have to fight some of these trash mobs with it. So I expect it'll start with some ads that pull regardless of you clearing the ads around the Viscous Fallout. Then we move on to the third boss, Electrocutioner 6000, which again is a simple boss. Most of the bosses are simple and are for the most part spank and tank, but that's just for Gnomeragon the dungeon. Once it becomes a level up raid, this will definitely change, and I can assume that this mob will have a new deadly mechanic, as will most of the other bosses. The fourth boss is also the most hated boss for Feral Druids in Classic, due to the need to farm manual crowd pummeler so you can be a good player. With Season of Discovery, that is no longer the case, as we get a new and improved version of manual crowd pummeler that is a permanent item. This new item is called the Automatic Crowd Pummeler, and it's a 3-minute cooldown, which you can use infinitely. I don't know if they plan to remove the original version, but they likely will. As for the boss itself, the changes they'll implement are likely going to be involving giving it actual mechanics and things you have to keep an eye out for. The fifth boss of Gnomeragon is the Dark Iron Ambassador, who is a rare that isn't guaranteed to spawn. This mob will likely get turned into a named mob and given an expanded nature within the raid. And then finally, we have Mechgineer Thermoplug, the big bad end boss of the dungeon and soon to be raid, who is very likely going to be as brutal as Calrus and Akumai have been in BFD. In the classic dungeon, like the rest of Gnomeragon, he is a spank and tank boss, but for the level up raid, expect him to get some new brutal abilities that'll test your ability to clear this level up raid. I don't know what those abilities will be, but with how difficult Akumai has been for some people, this boss will also likely be very difficult to clear. Now that we've covered the 6 bosses of the dungeon, let's talk about what more they will add or change in the raid. Gnomeragon the dungeon is a level 30 to 35 dungeon for the most part, so with it being turned into the endgame raid of Phase 2, that means the dungeon mobs and bosses will be pushed to level 40. That also doesn't account for the fact that BFD only had 6 bosses and one of those bosses was just a named rare with no abilities. And then BFD the level up raid had 7 full named bosses with a whole loot table and abilities. So for Gnomeragon, we can expect 1 to 3 new bosses, new events, new quests, and a massively changed loot table. As BFD has shown us, the loot table of the dungeon versus the raid is staggeringly different. As you can see here, this is all the loot in the BFD dungeon. And then if you look over here, look how staggeringly massive the amount of loot in the level up raid is. So we can expect the same loot changes to happen to Gnomeragon, whose current loot table is rather pitiable. I won't guess as to what items they'll add to the loot table, but considering the amount of insane and awesome loot that BFD got, expect a few new purple, some fantastic new gear crafting recipes, new elixir crafting recipes, a new world buff, way more quests and new quests, and perhaps even more than what I've listed to come for Gnomeragon in Phase 2. Also, a great little note for players is that getting to Gnomeragon for Horde will be much easier than it was in Classic, and it will be able to essentially just teleport to Gnomeragon and not have to do the long and arduous trek that Horde players have to do to get to Dead Mines in Phase 1. Now that we've covered the PvE content, let's dive into the PvP content. Stranglethorn Vale. This is an iconic zone and one that I would wager money that most people have had a terrible PvP experience on. Either you got griefed or you were the griefer. For anyone that played on a PvP server, it's an absolute core memory and experience for not just vanilla players but classic players to be ganked and murdered in Stranglethorn Vale. People have been ganking and abusing low levels in this zone for a long time, and I expect this to only get worse in Phase 2 of Season of Discovery. Between the Gurubashi Arena for the trinket, the fishing event, the whole zone being turned into a massive PvP event zone, some of the most iconic questing and WoW are one of the go-to zones to level up. All of these facets come together is going to make this place be absolutely wild come Phase 2. If you aren't one of the first people to get level 40 early on in Phase 2, I would highly recommend leveling up in another zone, so you don't have to experience the horrid ganking that'll happen. This advice is only for people that play on a PvP server. If you play on a PvE server, have fun. It's going to be a great experience. I personally don't know if there's going to be a reputation involved with the STV PvP event, similar to how you get Warsong Gold's reputation for doing the Ashenvale event zone. But I would garner that even if we don't get a reputation, there'll be more events and things hiding into the Gurubashi Arena and fishing event. And even if we don't get a new reputation, Arathi base and reputation will likely get earned through the PvP event zone. Whether that makes sense or not lore-wise doesn't matter too much, the experience is what really matters here. Plus having a troll bane murdering trolls, that's beautiful, and I say that as a horde and troll main. Now that we've covered the PvP and PvE, let's talk about Blizzard and how they've been handling Season of Discovery. Buffs and nerfs have been coming out pretty quickly, changes to quality of life are being implemented almost instantly, they've been monitoring feedback and reception to Phase 1 like a hawk, and so far, despite Hunters being nerfed twice, the game is still balanced. Yes, Hunters are still the strongest DPS despite getting nerfed twice. As for runes and how they feel, I must say that Blizzard has done a phenomenal job and that runes feel great. As a druid player, being able to spam Wrath infinitely for no mana cost has made leveling up and playing the game so much easier and fun. Though I'm personally not a fan of how quickly they all got discovered, but considering how many hundreds of thousands of players played Season of Discovery, I'm not surprised that all the runes were discovered so quickly. I do hope that the next set of 12 runes for each class added in Phase 2 takes longer to discover and is a little more involved and fun to interact with and unlock. But considering that there are so many new zones and places to discover these new runes in, I think it will take longer in Phase 2 to find all the runes. To give Blizzard credit though, the Warlock Metamorphosis rune being inside BFD wasn't the smartest decision, but they've already said that they won't repeat that mistake in the future, and they made it so you can acquire said rune inside and outside BFD. Overall, with phases lasting 4 to 12 weeks at most, the content being fun and well placed makes the game feel like a much better version of Classic, and I can honestly say that Season of Discovery is my favorite version of World of Warcraft to date. Hopefully when they finish Season of Discovery and unveil WoW Classic Plus fully, they take all that they've learned and give us a phenomenal and long-term future to Classic Plus. If you like this video, watch this video right here to see more from me. Like and subscribe if you like the content, as it helps me out a lot. Thank you, Ebonheart out.